There is a place in the ancient world where the wind carries the scent of cedar and jasmine through corridors of polished stone, where lamplight bends against gold-threaded curtains, and the footsteps of servants echo through halls wide enough to swallow the memory of entire nations. This is the Persian Empire at the height of its power, and it stretches from the warm shores of the Aegean Sea to the sun-baked plateaus of India, encompassing 127 provinces and millions of souls who wake each morning beneath the long shadow of a single throne. The empire is not merely large, it is a world unto itself, a civilization built on ceremony and hierarchy, on the careful arrangement of power and the quiet terror of those who live beneath it. At the center of this vast machine of governance and military might sits a king named Xerxes, known in the ancient Hebrew texts as Ahasuerus, a man whose word is law and whose moods shape the fortunes of empires. He is not a gentle king. He is not a philosopher king who sits in quiet reflection, considering the weight of his decisions. He is a king who feasts, who commands, who expects obedience the way the mountains expect silence. And in the third year of his reign, in the royal city of Susa, he throws a party. It is not a party in any sense that the modern world would recognize as modest. This is a celebration that lasts 180 days, a feast that stretches across half a year during which the king displays the wealth of his kingdom and the glory of his greatness to every prince and official and military commander in his domain. The palace gardens are transformed into something almost dreamlike, hung with white and violet linen curtains fastened to silver rods with cords of fine linen and purple. The couches are gold and silver set upon a mosaic floor of porphyry and marble and mother of pearl. Wine flows from golden vessels, each one different from the last, and the royal wine is abundant because the king has commanded it. It is excess-made architecture. It is power made edible. And for 6 months the great men of Persia eat and drink in the shadow of the king's magnificence, understanding without being told what it means to live beneath such authority. When the great feast ends, the king throws another smaller celebration for all the people in the citadel of Susa, from the greatest to the least. 7 days of additional feasting because the first 180 apparently did not suffice. And on the 7th day of the second celebration, when the king's heart is merry with wine, a thought occurs to him. He wants to show off his wife. Queen Vashti is by all accounts a woman of extraordinary beauty. The king, flushed with wine and pride and the accumulated pleasure of months of being celebrated, sends his 7 chamberlains to bring her before the assembled guests wearing her royal crown. He wants the princes and nobles to see her. In his mind, she becomes another treasure to be displayed alongside the golden vessels and marble floors and violet curtains. Vashti refuses. It is one of the most startling moments in ancient literature, a quiet, firm refusal from a woman who had every reason in the world to simply comply. The text does not give her reasons. It does not explain her thinking or record her words. It simply tells us that she refused. And that refusal lands in the king's court like a stone dropped into still water, sending ripples of consequence outward in every direction. The king is furious. His rage burns within him, and he turns to his wise men, the 7 princes of Persia and Media who have access to the king and rank highest in the kingdom. He asks them what the law demands should be done to Queen Vashti for failing to obey the king's command. The wise men quickly realize this is not simply a domestic dispute. It is a political crisis. If word spreads throughout the empire that Queen Vashti refused the king's command and suffered no consequence, they argue, then every wife in the empire will feel emboldened to show contempt for her husband. The nobles of Persia and Media will hear what the queen has done, and there will be contempt and anger enough to fill 100 provinces. Their solution is simple. A royal decree should be issued in the laws of Persia and Media so that it cannot be repealed. Vashti is never again to come before King Xerxes, and her royal position should be given to someone better than she. When this decree is proclaimed throughout the empire, they say, All women will honor their husbands from the greatest to the least. So it is written and sealed. Queen Vashti disappears from the story, removed from her position by the fears of powerful men who worried what her example might inspire. She leaves the historical record with her dignity intact, but her crown surrendered, and the empire turns its attention to finding her replacement. The king's attendants suggest that beautiful young virgins be sought throughout the provinces of the empire. Commissioners are appointed in every province to gather all beautiful young women to the harem in Susa, under the care of Haggai, the king's eunuch in charge of the women. They are to receive beauty treatments for 12 months, and the young woman who pleases the king most will become queen in Vashti's place. The king agrees, and from every corner of the empire, young women begin their long journey to the palace in Susa. Among them arrives a young Jewish woman named Esther. Her Hebrew name is Hadassah, meaning myrtle, but she is known as Esther, a name that may come from a Persian word meaning star, or perhaps from the Babylonian goddess Ishtar. She is an orphan whose mother and father have both died, and she has been raised by her cousin Mordecai, a man from the tribe of Benjamin, whose family had been carried into exile from Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar. Mordecai works at the king's gate, one of the many officials who serve within the imperial bureaucracy, and he has raised Esther as his own daughter with genuine love and care. When the decree is issued, Esther is taken with the other young women to the palace. Before she enters the gates, Mordecai gives her one instruction. She must not reveal her people or her family. She must not tell anyone that she is Jewish. In the Persian Empire, this is not a strange request. The Jews are a minority living in exile, their temple destroyed, and their city, Jerusalem, lying in ruins. Their identity is something carried quietly rather than displayed openly. Esther keeps the secret and enters the palace simply as a beautiful young woman among many, carrying her true identity within her, like a lamp hidden beneath a covering. Esther soon finds favor with Haggai, the king's eunuch in charge of the women. He is pleased with her and quickly provides her with beauty treatments, special food, and 7 chosen young women to attend her. He even moves her and her attendants to the best place in the harem. Something subtle is happening beneath the surface of the story. Esther is not only beautiful, she possesses a presence that wins favor wherever she goes. Again and again, the text mentions that she finds favor, suggesting that doors are opening for her in ways that seem guided by more than coincidence. Meanwhile, Mordecai does not disappear. Every day he walks near the court of the harem to learn how Esther is doing. He keeps watch from whatever distance he is allowed, faithful and concerned. Inside the palace, Esther learns the customs of the court and undergoes the year-long preparation required before any woman may appear before the king. The process lasts 12 months, 6 months with oil of myrrh, and 6 months with spices and ointments. Each young woman visits the king for one night, entering in the evening and returning in the morning to a second harem under the care of another eunuch named Xerxes. She will only see the king again if he calls for her by name. For most of these women, that single night determines their future. Those who are not chosen live the rest of their lives in comfortable captivity within the palace. When Esther's turn comes, she asks for nothing beyond what Haggai advises. She does not burden herself with excessive jewelry or elaborate clothing like some of the others. Instead, she trusts the judgment of the man who understands the king's preferences. When Esther appears before the king, and he loves her more than all the other women, she wins grace and favor in his sight beyond all the virgins. He places the royal crown upon her head and makes her queen instead of Vashti. A great feast is held in her honor, and the king distributes gifts throughout the provinces with royal generosity. Esther becomes queen, living within the palace with all its beauty and danger, while quietly guarding the secret of her Jewish identity. Mordecai continues to sit at the king's gate, watching events unfold. One day he overhears 2 of the king's officials, Bigthan and Teresh, plotting to assassinate the king. Mordecai reports the plot to Queen Esther, who informs the king in Mordecai's name. The matter is investigated and found to be true, and the two conspirators are executed. The event is recorded in the royal chronicles in the king's presence, yet nothing happens afterward. Mordecai receives no reward or promotion. His loyalty is simply written down and forgotten as life in the palace continues. It is at this point that the story turns darker. After these events, King Xerxes promotes a man named Haman, the Agagite, son of Hammedatha, raising him above all the other officials in the empire. The king commands that everyone at the royal gate bow down and pay homage to Haman as a sign of submission. But Mordecai refuses. Day after day, the other officials bow when Haman passes, yet Mordecai remains standing. When questioned, he reveals that he is a Jew. Whether his refusal is based on faith, ancient tribal hostility, or personal conviction is not fully explained. What is clear is that he will not bow. When Haman discovers this, he is filled with fury. Learning that Mordecai is Jewish, his anger grows into something far more terrible. It is not enough for him to destroy Mordecai alone. Instead, he decides to destroy all the Jews throughout the entire kingdom of Xerxes. His wounded pride expands into a plan of genocide. To determine the best date for this destruction, he casts lots, an ancient form of divination. The Hebrew word for these lots is Purim. The lot falls on the 12th month, the month of Adar, nearly a year away, giving Haman time to prepare. He approaches the king with a carefully crafted accusation. There is a certain people scattered throughout the provinces of the empire, he says, whose laws are different from everyone else's, and who do not obey the king's laws. Therefore, it is not appropriate for the king to tolerate them. If the king agrees, Haman offers to pay 10,000 talents of silver into the royal treasury if a decree is issued for their destruction. The king, apparently unconcerned with the details, removes his signet ring and gives it to Haman, granting him authority to do as he pleases with the people in question. The decree is then written in the name of King Xerxes and sealed with the king's signet ring. It is sent to all the king's satraps and governors and officials of every province, to every people in their own language. The letters command that all Jews, young and old, women and children, be destroyed, killed, and annihilated in a single day, the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, and their possessions be plundered. Couriers go out swiftly by order of the king, and the decree is issued in Susa, the citadel. And then, in one of the most chilling details in all of ancient literature, the text simply notes that the king and Haman sat down to drink while the city of Susa was thrown into confusion. Two men sit with their wine while an empire processes the information that an entire people has been scheduled for extermination. The contrast is almost too stark to bear. While Haman and the king drink, Jewish communities throughout 127 provinces are reading the decree, understanding what it means, and beginning to mourn. And in Susa itself, Mordecai tears his clothes and puts on sackcloth and ashes, and goes out into the middle of the city wailing with a loud and bitter cry. Throughout all the provinces where the king's command and his decree reach, there is great mourning among the Jews, with fasting and weeping and lamenting, and many of them lie in sackcloth and ashes. When Esther's young women and her eunuchs come and tell her what is happening, she is deeply distressed. She sends garments to Mordecai to clothe him, to replace the sackcloth, but Mordecai does not accept them. She sends one of the king's eunuchs, Hathach, to learn what is happening and why. And Mordecai tells Hathach everything that has happened and gives him a copy of the text of the decree that was issued in Susa for the Jews' destruction, so that Hathach can show it to Esther and explain it to her and charge her to go to the king and beg his favor and plead with him on behalf of her people. When Esther receives this message, her response is honest and frightened and deeply human. She sends Hathach back to Mordecai with her answer. All the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces know that if any man or woman goes to the king inside the inner court without being called, there is but one law: to be put to death. I accept the one to whom the king holds out the golden scepter so that he may live. And she has not been called to come into the king for 30 days. This is the reality of her life. She is the queen of the most powerful empire in the known world, and she cannot simply walk into the throne room and speak to her husband. The protocol is absolute. To approach the king uninvited is to risk death. The golden scepter extended toward you is mercy. The golden scepter withheld is execution. And Esther has not been summoned for a month. She does not know if the king is pleased with her. She does not know how she stands in his favor. She is explaining to Mordecai, and perhaps also to herself, why what he is asking is extraordinarily dangerous. Mordecai's response, delivered through Hathach back to Esther, is one of the most memorable passages in all of Scripture. Do not think to yourself that in the king's palace you will escape any more than all the other Jews. For if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this? This is not simply a challenge. It is a theological statement and a practical argument simultaneously. Mordecai is telling Esther that her position does not protect her. If she thinks that being queen means she will be exempted from the coming destruction, she is wrong. The decree names all Jews without exception. And then he makes the deeper point, the one that has echoed through centuries of commentary and reflection. Who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this? All of it. He is suggesting the death of her parents, the exile of her people, her remarkable beauty, in the strange chain of events that led a Jewish orphan girl to become the queen of Persia, the favor she found with Haggai, the love she inspired in the king. All of it may have been moving toward this single moment. The timing is not accidental. The positioning is not coincidence. And if she does not act, she will lose everything anyway. The door of opportunity will have closed without her having walked through it. Esther takes this in, and then she sends her answer back to Mordecai. And the person who answers is different from the one who first received his message. She is no longer explaining why she cannot. She is organizing how she will go. She says, "Gather all the Jews to be found in Susa, and hold a fast on my behalf, and do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my young women will also fast as you do. Then I will go to the king, though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish." The phrase lands with the quiet force of a door closing and another opening. If I perish, I perish. It is not bravado. It is not the theatrical courage of someone who believes they will certainly survive. It is the acknowledgement that the outcome is genuinely uncertain and the decision to act anyway. She has counted the cost, considered the danger, weighed her position against the lives of her people, and she has chosen. Mordecai goes away and does everything that Esther has commanded him. For 3 days, the Jewish community in Susa fasts. Esther and her attendants fast in the palace. There is no food, no water, no ordinary rhythm of daily life. There is only the directed intensity of people who believe that prayer and fasting can reach beyond the walls of a palace, beyond the protocols of an empire, into whatever realm of power and purpose stands above and behind the visible world. They are asking for something they cannot arrange themselves. They are preparing for a confrontation with earthly power by seeking connection with something higher. Then Haman was terrified before the king and the queen. The king in his rage rises from the feast and goes into the palace garden. Haman, realizing that disaster has been determined against him by the king, stays to beg for his life from Queen Esther. He's so desperate that when the king returns from the palace garden and finds Haman has fallen on the couch where Esther is, the king misreads the scene entirely, perhaps willfully. Will he even assault the queen in my own house? The word goes out from the king's mouth and the servants cover Haman's face. One of the king's eunuchs, Harbona, mentions as if in passing that the gallows 50 cubits high stands at Haman's house. which Haman prepared for Mordecai, who had saved the king. The king says, "Hang him on that," and they hang Haman on the gallows he had prepared for Mordecai. Then the king's anger abated. It is almost impossible not to notice what has happened here. The instrument of death that Haman constructed specifically for Mordecai becomes the instrument of his own death. He built it, named it, designated it, positioned it in his own yard, and died on it. The reversal is complete, precise, and carries the quality of something that was arranged at a level beyond human planning. But the story is not finished because the decree is still in force. Persian law, once written and sealed with the king's ring, cannot be revoked. The edict calling for the destruction of all Jews throughout the empire still stands. Haman is dead, but his legacy threatens to outlast him. The day set for the annihilation is still coming, written in stone by the laws of Persia and Media. Esther goes to the king again, this time falling at his feet and weeping and begging him to avert the evil plan of Haman the Agagite and the plot that he had devised against the Jews. The king extends the golden scepter to Esther again, and she rises and stands before him. She makes her plea eloquently and specifically. If it pleases the king, and if he regards her with favor, and the thing seems right before the king, and she is pleasing in his eyes, let an order be written to revoke the letters devised by Haman the Agagite. The king's answer reflects the nature of Persian law. He cannot revoke the decree. What is written in the name of the king and sealed with the king's ring cannot be revoked. But he can write another decree, a new edict that allows the Jews to defend themselves, to gather and protect themselves, and to destroy the power of any armed force that might attack them. He gives his ring to Esther and Mordecai writes letters in the king's name and seals them with the king's signet ring, sending them by mounted couriers on swift horses bred from the royal stud. The letters give the Jews in every city the right to gather and defend their lives, to destroy and kill and annihilate any armed force that might attack them, to plunder their goods. When Mordecai goes out from the presence of the king in royal robes of blue and white, with a great golden crown and a robe of fine linen and purple, the city of Susa shouts and rejoices. And for the Jews there is light and gladness and joy and honor. In every province and in every city, and wherever the king's command and his edict reached, there is gladness and joy among the Jews, a feast and a holiday. The appointed day comes, the 13th day of the 12th month. Throughout the empire, Jews gather and defend themselves. Those who had planned to profit from the decree against the Jews find themselves facing communities that are prepared, authorized, and fighting for their lives. The enemies of the Jews are defeated. Haman's 10 sons who had carried forward their father's work are killed. And on the 14th day, the Jews rest and make it a day of feasting and joy. Esther sends letters to all the Jews establishing that they should keep annually the 14th and 15th days of the month of Adar as days when the Jews got relief from their enemies, and as the month that had been turned for them from sorrow into gladness, and from mourning into a holiday. They are to make them days of feasting and gladness, a days for sending gifts of food to one another and gifts to the poor. This is the festival of Purim, which takes its name from the lots that Haman cast to determine the date of the Jews' destruction. The instrument of their intended annihilation becomes the name of their annual celebration. The feast is established and observed to this day, a permanent marker in the Jewish calendar of the moment when a death sentence became a deliverance. A Mordecai the Jew is second in rank to King Xerxes, and is great among the Jews and popular with the multitude of his brothers. For he sought the welfare of his people and spoke peace to all his people. Esther remains queen. The Jewish people survive. The particular shape of how it all happened, the timing, the sleepless night, the chronicle that happened to be read aloud, the gallows that Haman built for someone else, the scepter extended rather than withheld. All of it is now part of the record. What is perhaps most striking about the Book of Esther And what has generated centuries of theological discussion is that the name of God does not appear anywhere in it, not once. This is unique in the Hebrew Bible. Every other book invokes the divine name, calls on the Lord, records direct communication between the human and the holy. The Book of Esther is different. God is not mentioned. There are no miracles in the conventional sense, no burning bushes, no parting seas, no voices from the clouds. There is instead a series of events that taken individually might each be explained as coincidence or politics or human nature. But taken together, following as they do a particular shape and moving toward a particular conclusion, they carry the unmistakable weight of design. This is in fact one of the most sophisticated theological arguments in the entire biblical canon. The Book of Esther does not show you God. It shows you what a world looks like when God is working in it through ordinary means, through human decisions and royal protocols, and the inability of a king to sleep and the willingness of a young woman to take an impossible risk. It says something profound about the nature of divine action in a world that does not always announce itself as sacred. It says that the fingerprints may be everywhere, even when the hand is invisible. Esther herself is a figure of extraordinary complexity. She's not a prophet. She does not receive divine revelations or angelic visitors. She begins the story as a young woman who has been carefully sheltered and instructed to conceal her identity. And she moves through the narrative navigating the complicated politics of a foreign court with a combination of natural grace and deliberate strategy. She obeys Mordecai because she trusts him. She approaches the king because she has been convinced that she has no real alternative. She chooses her timing carefully, inviting her enemies to dinner not once but twice before revealing her hand. And yet for all this political calculation, there is a moment in her story that transcends strategy. It is the 3 days of fasting before she approaches the king. Whatever else the fast represents, it represents an acknowledgement that she cannot do this on her own. She's asking for help from whatever power exists beyond her own cleverness and beauty and position. And when she emerges from those 3 days and puts on her royal robes and walks to the inner court, she's not just a queen approaching her king. She's a person who has done everything she can do and then trusted the rest to something beyond herself. The question that Mordecai asks her whether she has come to the kingdom for such a time as this is not merely a question about one woman's purpose. It is a question about the relationship between individual lives and larger narratives. It suggests that the details of a person's life, including the painful ones, including the orphaning and the exile, and the hiding of her true identity, may be preparation for something that only becomes visible in retrospect. The parents she lost, the people from whom she was separated, the years of keeping a secret, none of these things felt like preparation at the time. They felt like loss. But in the moment when her position and her courage and her people's need all converge, and every detail of her history becomes relevant, this is not historical. This is permanent. The book closes with Esther and Mordecai established in positions of influence, the Jewish people preserved and celebrating, and the festival of Purim founded as an annual memory. But before it closes, it quietly notes that God's name is still not there. The preservation of an entire people has been accomplished through human courage, human strategy, human relationships, and whatever it is that guides a king's sleeplessness toward a particular page in the Chronicles on a particular night. The story does not demand that you call this providence. It simply shows you what providence might look like when it declines to announce itself. And it leaves you with a question that has no final answer, but has animated human reflection for thousands of years. Looking at your own life, at the particular collection of circumstances and losses and skills and positions that constitute your story, is it possible that some of what seemed merely to happen to you was actually preparation for something that has not yet arrived? Is it possible that the moment for which you have been positioned, perhaps without knowing it, is still approaching? Is it possible that even now, in whatever ordinary day you occupy, there is a sleepless king somewhere who is about to open a chronicle, and that what happens next depends on whether you are willing to put on your royal robes and walk toward the threshold? Who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this? The question hangs there patient and open the way that the most important questions always do. Not demanding an answer, not promising that the answer will be comfortable or safe, simply asking, simply wondering, simply suggesting that the story, your story, may be larger and stranger and more carefully arranged than you have yet understood. And in that wondering, in that openness to the possibility that the ordinary details of an ordinary life may be moving towards something that has not yet become visible, there is something that functions very much like hope. Not certainty, not a guarantee, but the refusal to close the book before the last page has been written. The willingness to remain present to the story you're in, because the story you're in may be exactly the one that needs you in it. The city of Susa in the end is glad. The Jewish communities in 127 provinces breathe again. Mordecai walks through the streets in blue and white crowned with gold. Esther sits in the palace she entered as an orphan with a secret and rules now as a queen whose identity is known and whose courage is part of the record. And somewhere in all of that, in the gap between what was planned for destruction and what actually happened, in the space between Haman's gallows and Mordecai's horse, in the reversal of the decree, the overturning of the verdict, the survival of the condemned, there is something that the text declines to name, but that every reader feels. It is the sense that behind the visible machinery of empires and decrees and court politics and human pride and human fear, something else is also operating. Something patient, something precise, something that works through the courage of one young woman and the stubbornness of one old man at the gate, through the sleeplessness of a king and the timing of a chronicle, through the very pride of a villain which becomes the instrument of his undoing. Something that does not need to announce itself to be real. The Book of Esther does not tell you what to call that something. It only shows you what it looks like when it is at work. And then it establishes a feast and says, remember this. Every year remember this. Eat and drink and give to one another and give to the poor and make noise when the enemy's name is spoken. And remember that what seemed irreversible was reversed, that what seemed certain was undone, that the night that looked like the end turned out to be the night before the turning. Remember that there was a young woman who stood at the edge of a throne room and said, if I perish, I perish. Remember that she did not perish. Remember that the people she carried into that room with her, hidden in the story she told the king over wine in a carefully prepared dinner, they did not perish either. Remember that the moment required exactly the person who was there. And then ask yourself quietly, in whatever ordinary circumstances you inhabit right now, whatever palace or gate or ordinary room you occupy, what moment might be requiring exactly you? What truth you might be positioned to speak that no one else in your particular situation can speak? What people might be waiting without knowing they are waiting for whatever courage you have been all this time through all of it quietly preparing. As the night slowly settles and the sounds of a long day begin to fade away, we come before you, Lord, with hearts that are quieter and slower, as if our souls themselves are gently lowering into rest after all the steps we have taken throughout this day. There may have been moments of joy and hope, but there may also have been moments of exhaustion, heavy thoughts, and unanswered concerns still lingering somewhere in our minds. Yet in this very moment, before our eyes close and sleep begins to take us, we pause, we breathe deeply, and we remember that you are still here, still watching over us, still surrounding our lives with a peace that the world could never give. Lord, we thank you for this day. Whether it was perfect or imperfect, whether we accomplished everything we hoped for or not, the truth remains that you carried us through every hour, every minute, every moment. There were times when we clearly sensed your presence, But there were also moments when we were too busy, too worried, or too distracted to notice that you were very near. Yet your faithfulness never changed, your love never diminished, and your care continued to surround our lives even when we were not aware of it. Now that the day has ended, we also want to lay before you everything that weighs heavily on our hearts. It may be worries about the future, unanswered questions, or responsibilities that seem larger than our strength. It may be quiet sorrows, unspoken disappointments, or mistakes that leave us with regret. But Lord, you already know all these things even before we speak them. There is no thought within our hearts that you do not understand, and no pain that escapes your sight. And so tonight we choose to place every burden into your hands. Lord, forgive us if today we spoke words that we should not have spoken, if we reacted with anger, or if we missed opportunities to show love and kindness to others. And we are human and often fall short, yet we know that your mercy is greater than all our failures. Please cleanse our hearts, renew our minds, and allow us to enter this night with lighter spirits. Lord, grant us peace as we sleep tonight. Let our minds grow quiet so that the endless stream of thoughts begins to slow down. Let each breath become deeper and gentler, reminding us that we are safely held in your care. And even as the world around us falls into darkness, may your light continue to shine within our hearts. We also pray for our families and loved ones. Please watch over them tonight, keep them safe, and surround them with your peace. If anyone is sick, bring healing. If anyone feels lonely, draw close to them. If anyone feels tired or discouraged, renew their hope. Remind us, Lord, that sleep itself is a gift from you. When we sleep, we acknowledge that we cannot control everything in life. When we rest, we trust that you continue to work. While we sleep, you are still holding the world in your hands. So tonight, before sleep comes, we place our full trust in you. Protect our rest, renew our strength, and when the morning light arrives, help us wake with grateful hearts and stronger faith.